Hi, I thought I'd try making a short video about being in love and what that means and why it appears to be that I'm in an abusive relationship and that I'm returning to an abusive relationship, and that the hard part for me is the feeling of love that I have for the person who abuses me. And so one of my standpoints is often of, oh, I'm this total feminist and I don't want any women to be abused, and oh, he's a jerk and I'll get rid of him. But now that I'm in this situation of actually having this in love feeling for someone who has abused me extremely, I have a lot of more sympathy for women that actually are in love or infatuated with or in some kind of tender or dependency-based relationship with someone who is abusive. I think what I tend to do is advocate for his excuses, and this is why, and this is what his reasons are, but no one's really advocating for my needs to sanity and safety and freedom from ridicule and verbal assault and constant toil. So I don't have a big message. But rather a huge sense of, in some ways, defeat, and in some ways resilience, that I now finally have a moment of somewhat safety away from his abuse due to my family stepping in. And I have a great feeling of humiliation for how the abusiveness hurts my image of self and hurts my image of myself in the community, and a feeling of disappointment at almost not working hard enough, even though I've almost worked myself to death trying to make it work. And I have a feeling of just wanting to go in hiding and of never trying again, and kind of have a strong feeling of missing him and missing nice things about him and missing the things I tolerate and missing the good bits in between the bad bits. But kind of sadly, when my family member came in to break up the party, he was in the middle of like a down phase where he was insulting me and being denigrating and mean to me. So it's sort of like having parted on that last final note leaves me without a feeling of love or a feeling of kindness or warmth. But I have a feeling that I've helped his support system attempt to come to his aid and attempt to help him, and that I've done about everything I can. I don't feel like I haven't done enough, but I think the bad fit of it is I can never be truly submissive, and I can never be verbally put down by men without fighting back, or without subversively fighting back and trying to help them see it my way. And I can't really give any advice to anyone, because I think the ultimate experience is that no two human experiences are unique. They're all different, and there's nothing I can say that will have any relevance to anyone, other than in some ways it feels like love, or the illusion of love, is really worth it. But when the illusion crumbles, and like sometimes lying in bed I think, oh, well, he hasn't exploded at me in the last few hours, but maybe he will, and maybe there's something I'm going to say that's going to upset him, or something I'm going to do that's going to upset him, and I never know what it might be, and I'm afraid, because I don't know when the next explosion will be, but I'm very scared of it. And that always living in fear, and then always living kind of with a sad feeling that, oh, but I wanted someone always to be kind to me, and I wanted someone who didn't berate me, and those words still sting, and those attitudes still sting, and that inability to recognize that I have needs, that all stings. And how to absorb all that feeling of that loss. And then the sort of undermining questioning of, was I ever really in love, or do I really love him, or is it more like a physical attraction, or a beauty attraction, or comfort, or now reliability? And there's a lot of fun times, but to me they were sort of poisoned by the scary times, when I felt fearful for my own safety, chronically fearful for my own property, fearful that, there was a time that I was afraid to even have canned foods near him, because I was afraid he would hurt me by throwing them, because his physical presence was so constantly threatening, and he had just smashed a picture frame on the wall, and I felt like anything and everything in a home is a potential blunt instrument, object, and I'm fearful to have anything, so I'll get rid of everything, including multiple times I've gotten rid of all the knives, and multiple times I've gotten rid of anything that's glass, or heavy, or weighted, or hidden things that I feel that could be used against me. And the constant kind of almost scurrying around, making like with a fine-tooth comb, like making little bits of security for myself, when I can't actually predict what the next explosion is going to be like, or what physical aspects it will involve. One time it was getting slammed in the head and getting a really strong concussion on this side of my brain by a backpack, which he still is kind of in denial about the severity of it, and in denial about the need to apologize, and for him, he's defensive about it. And then more recently, he had an explosion with throwing a huge bag full of jars of jelly and jars of Vegenaise onto the pavement of the Safeway, where glass and jelly go exploding, and some very scared and curious onlookers are looking on like, why is he doing that? And wow, suddenly grocery objects can be weapons of danger around someone like that. And that night he used curse words at me that were so foul. Sexist and demeaning and derogatory, that I felt like he had hit a new low, and these new lows and new lows and new lows, assaulting his sister's domestic violence perpetrator was the low that I didn't want to see. I didn't want to see it. I don't want to be forced to watch it. I don't think it was fair to make a 7-year-old girl watch it. And the lack of respect of children I found really disturbing. And then the subsequent death threats after I witnessed the assault, basically to coerce me into silence, to get me off of the land and get me far away. And then the death threats being conduited through him and his apparent inability to understand the gravity of that. I was to get it off my chest a bit. I think the moral of the story is that no human can understand what another human is going through. And for me especially, the cross-cultural conflict is that my dad was far less offensively sexist and violent than this person from his culture. So the culture shock, I've been trying to mesh and get along and have some insights about and try to understand, and I've really at rock bottom been appalled at the violence and the misogyny and the domestic violence and the child abuse that are endemic to his land and people and region. And so for me, I felt very sort of scared and saddened by it all. And my attempts to be productive and do something for them or for the overall good of the community or for the awareness have in some way not borne enough fruit for my satisfaction, but have at least eased the pain of my conscience of how can I now be exposed to this vast new amount of knowledge of the extreme poverty in rural America and how it has a maiming effect on its victims, and as the victims stretch out to find new people to torment, I then am becoming the victim of their family's poverty and poverty of outlook and poverty of ideas in terms of especially women's right or intrinsic right to dignity and peacefulness and harmony, domestic tranquility. The absence of domestic tranquility. Something from which my father suffered his whole relationship with my mother. Feels as though it would put me in a grave early. So in a sense, maybe now I have the opportunity to choose life versus an early death. So we'll see. What do I choose? Where I go? Who do I become?